some reason to feel not good enough, and it's hard at the end of the day. I need some distraction. Oh, beautiful release. Memories seep from my veins. Let me be empty. Oh, weightless, and maybe I'll find some peace tonight. In the arms of the angel, fly away from here, from this dark, cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. You are pulled from the wreckage
Like describing
on your
the different layers of
side.
irony in his work. I don't know. He's a strange guy. I don't know how to pin him down.
He's a weird fucking egg. I couldn't look at his videos for that long. I just started getting like angry and confused.
Me too. But I kind of like how angry I'm getting. I'm already really angry. So.
We're live. Hi.
Hey.
Yo, what's up? 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 Welcome to episode 2 of Private Program. I'm Mason, and these are all my friends. Hey, everybody, say hi. Hello. Today we're kind of jumping around a little bit. I think we're gonna kind of build on the combos that were kind of talked about last week, because literally the day after the first episode, fucking Daddy Sanders dropped out, and the world just feels a little bit fucking darker. Now that we have to vote blue no matter who. We're gonna be doing quite a little bit of stuff today. We've got a segment from Lex today, which will be the first one on the series. We also have a musical performance tonight from Malcolm, an acoustic set, which will be. But yeah, maybe we start with like Lex. How are you feeling?
Good. Show my setup here. So I'm gonna be showing you guys how to make a white dragon, which is basically a margarita but with an egg white in it. So step 1, I have my coupe glass, and I'm gonna line the rim with worm salt, because I feel like worm salt just better.
Worm salt.
Yeah, worm salt. I can go. Just gonna put like a little bit on the glass. So we're gonna do 2 ounces of tequila.
What is worm salt?
It is salt with crushed up worms. It's worm salt.
Hey, girl.
Why is it good?
Very self-explanatory.
Why did they worm it?
I don't know. It goes nice with mezcal.
Is it like the same worm that goes into mezcal?
Not all mezcal has worms in it.
Not all tequila have worms.
No.
Wrong? Is it
It's
just
worm.
So we're gonna add triple sec.
He's like moving on.
Like where do you buy worm salt?
I was in Mexico for a month a while ago, and I still have the salt. Half lime juice. And 25 ounces simple syrup, and egg white. That's not supposed to happen. And then we're gonna throw some ice in there. Take it again so it can get cold. Go. Why I like using egg white is because it's nice and foamy, good texture, and it makes everything a little sweeter. Perfect. That's a white dragon.
Hey. Yeah.
That honestly sounds delicious.
I'm
That
gonna
looks-
make one for my mom, so I'll still be here.
Damn, that looks good as fuck, honestly. Like,
Delicious and nutritious.
I also forgot you do an orange peel twist. You have your orange peel, and then you just throw it in the glass.
no,
I kind of
Really?
want a margarita now.
I
So
know,
good.
fucking energy.
If you're making a margarita, throw an egg white in there. It's so much better.
Girl, I've never understood why the fuck people put egg whites in shit. What does it do? Like,
It makes the texture nicer, like everything gets like frothy and foamy, and it also makes the drink sweeter and just balances the flavors out so you don't it's not like too strong, not too sweet.
is
It
it the
really makes everything
placenta
better.
that makes it sweeter, though?
Huh?
What makes it sweeter?
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
Listen, I just mix it together.
Take some of the bite out of the.
It definitely does that, but it also does make things sweeter. I don't know, man. Just do it. Just try it.
All
I don't think-
We're trying to transition from drinking alcohol specifically for taste and not to get us fucked up. So it's kind of a hard lesson, but I know we have to. On that note, I am drinking Evan Williams tonight.
Here's that.
Fucking cheap. Damn, that looks good as fuck. I miss you making drink.
Build a bar cart.
One of our
Um,
You have like a fucking IPA tap like in your
no,
house.
Trevor. This is the dumbest thing Trevor's ever gone. I put it away. I love you, Trevor. No sense.
$25.
It's like a mini keg, but it only has 3 cups of beer. But like for who? And you
For
have
you
to-
and two guests,
like,
Barry.
This is like you have to put the beer in the fridge like 12 hours before.
Oh, wait, we were supposed to get some today. Did it come? Did you?
Oh my god, you're sending more beer?
Well, they gave it to me for
We have these
free.
left. Where am I gonna put?
They gave it to me for free because they charged me $100, and I was like, "Hey, you didn't tell me you're gonna charge me." And they're like, "Oh, sorry. Here's free beer."
That's actually pretty
You need
sick.
to warn me if there's more beer or those kegs coming into the house. Like, you have a lot of
Does it taste good, the beer?
like
From the
beer.
thing?
It's like
Okay.
kind of fancy because it's like a draft app. Like it's like draft beer. It's like a Keurig for
That's cool.
no one needs it, but we have.
Yeah, I think there's a
Sounds
bunch
like
of
something
options,
specific
like
for we were.
normal beers, but they on tap. But I don't know which ones we got. It was only 20.
I want a beer with like foam art like they do on lattes. Can it make one of those?
Like, can you do that with beer?
When you get Guinness,
Shamrock, right?
yeah, the
That doesn't
Shamrock.
happen where I go.
I don't want a
I don't know how
shamrock,
they
but I
do it,
want
but they
something
do it.
else. Like a little art or a leaf or something.
A leaf.
Holy.
You know that leaf? The iconic leaf?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Give me the damn leaf.
You could do that if you have a drink with egg white because it's foam on the top. You could like use bitters or any syrup to do like art.
You
Wow.
can't do it with this giant mini keg we have.
That's what I want.
Alex, that's for next. That's for next week.
Huh?
That's for next week. Beer foam art.
Next week I'll do
Fuck yeah.
a portrait on my.
True. But maybe this week, however, transition. The first. Okay, well, fuck. Our little socialist fever dream is now over. Bernie Sanders is gone and dead, and it's really sad. I'll start with the first prompt because it kind of changes some of the combos. God, this whiskey is hitting me really quickly. I need some water. But I guess I'll just fucking read the prompts. Just to kind of get into what this like first thing is like. Bernie Sanders dropped out the day after the last episode, and that really shifts some of the previous conversations around like Medicare for All, which was like a major conversation around kind of our like, well, kind of like futures that we kind of saw for ourselves. Our conversation that we were having earlier. Establishment politics and the status quo for this coming election cycle is like completely kind of embedded in, you know, vote blue no matter who fucking rhetoric. And since then, Wisconsin's in-person voting happened in the midst of alleged, quarantine. Voter suppression has been and will continue to become a large issue forward in November. It's really interesting to kind of think of, I think, kind of Republicans realizing that voter suppression is needed to kind of maintain their kind of power over kind of Senate and Congress. But we're also increasingly kind of realizing with the stagnation of kind of the left from kind of centrist Democrats that might be happening for the Democratic establishment. And I just kind of want to know, what does that mean for us fucking Bernie bros? Are we voting blue no matter who at this point? What does community organizing mean in this current state of isolation? And like, how far are we stretching the bandwidth of marginalized communities during this consolidation of power from establishment Dems and their corporate sponsors? I mean, we've been talking. All I've been seeing is like, fucking Biden is doing great with black voters, and just kind of like it just seems like such a fucking media kind of bullet point. I don't know. What do you guys feel about this shit? How do you feel kind of coming after like a week after? How does your own personal politics? Are we all communists now? Like what's the energy?
I woke up that morning and screamed into my pillow for like 5 minutes when I found out that he dropped. And I was very, very upset. And it seems like I just want to bring up off the bat like the sort of idea of like a social contract that we all have supposedly to the system, we sort of owe it to each other to vote even though we don't want to, or something like that, and that's so like that's sort of the essence, that's sort of the root of my conflict. I don't want to, none of us want to vote for somebody we don't want. And it's unfair to be posed with the lesser of two evils. Do we accept because then if we were posed with the question like, do we want to concede our ideas about how we want things to go and vote for blue no matter who, or do we continue to try to hold on to what Bernie has started and try to, I don't know, like be more anti-establishment and just not vote, but like what are the implications of that? I'm very conflicted.
Is anybody here registered in the state that matters?
Yeah, I'm registered in Pennsylvania purposely because I know that they need to vote. I was gonna just say that like, even though obviously this is a huge upset for everybody for many different reasons, and Joe Biden is a very scary candidate because he really doesn't represent what I think a lot of people who are becoming real adults want for a liberal candidate. I think this is like, I know this has been said before, but I think because people have really, I think this pandemic, and then I think what we're being hit with is like people can really start to understand the value of local government and being involved with those policies, and like ultimately that will shape your federal government. So I think that like the bright side to this is that people will start paying more attention to that. And I think people who wouldn't necessarily, well, I hope this is true, that people who wouldn't necessarily think about going into politics start considering going into politics, because not only do they care and do they have like the empathy that's much so lacking, but maybe also they don't want to deal with this anymore, and something this is like a push come to shove situation now. Is that too positive? I don't know.
My thing is like, is vote blue no matter who the only option we have? Like, why can't we organize as, like, if every Bernie supporter, this might seem idealistic, but if every Bernie supporter, instead of going towards Biden and vote Biden, why don't we all like organize and like try to break down this two-party system? And I know it's like obviously not easy, and we've like tried to do it in the past, like in 2016, but I just feel like voting blue no matter who is just clearly just not. I feel like there needs to be a change, and that's not changing anything.
I agree with 100%. I would say that the way to counterpose that, like, have the time now to write up solutions for how things are. We could offer solutions to make things better, and I think we're like back to how things are, because people that this doesn't work, but they didn't offer solutions. So anybody who sees a pathway to make change, try to, like, if people could rally behind that person, or if they could vocalize themselves, I think that there is a way to break it down. It's just like finding enough people to rally together, but with solutions in hand, to be like, we could do it this way. This is us mapping it out for you how this would be better, outside of just like our normal political rallying.
Yeah, I don't think like trying to do anything democratic there anything. I feel like we just like done the same thing that happened in 2016 over again. And then I think that like, I don't know if you guys saw like the leaked Labor Party stuff that dropped on Twitter.
Oh, we didn't. What is
I
it?
think
What's that? No,
Yeah.
what's that?
the story was that like some idiot at the Labor Party,
That's all it was, you know. That was why him.
like they accidentally somehow like put all of their WhatsApp messages into their like public email, and basically it just showed that like the right wing of the Labor Party was willing to lose the election just so that Jeremy Corbyn wasn't Labor leader anymore, both in 2017, the Theresa May, and the newest election, which is like. And obviously, like, there's like the 2016 DNC emails. It's like they're never gonna let anything good happen.
That's like I feel like I have less like faith in like the current system more than ever, because you know what's more democratic and fair than like a grassroots freaking movement where, you know, like Bernie Sanders' platform. It's like it's like the establishment is like willing to like destroy or hurt itself in order to preserve itself, rather than, you know, sit back and take a second. Maybe these things aren't working, and maybe you know, maybe taking a radical step will you know, make things.
Yeah, I think that's also why like I wasn't like completely like, I was still heartbroken, but I wasn't like taken completely by surprise that Bernie sort of dropped out, especially when it's like continuing the primary was like the Democratic Party was going to continue to make people go out and vote. It was like if you didn't stop the primary now, it was like people were going to fucking die. Like I'm sure that like people who had to vote in Wisconsin are like, there's going to be like a spike in cases. There hasn't already. Like if that hasn't already happened.
I think for a lot of people our age who, I mean, speaking for myself, like I was basically like a lib until pretty recently. And so Bernie is like a lot of pushing like people our age farther left. But looking at it, thinking about it today, it's his ascendancy is such an anomaly in terms of the issues that were being discussed on like in the context of the president, you know? And so now that the figurehead pushing the two parties left in any meaningful sense is gone, and I think it shows that just like it doesn't really matter who's president, and you have to like focus on really small and local things, because this whole Bernie phenomenon was pretty fucking random that he was able to actually come to national prominence. I don't know if there's anybody else who's like in a position of being able to talk about these things on like the same level. And so there's just I don't see. I think the Democrats are also like really comfortable losing, and what they that
They love it. They're obsessed with it.
they're fucking just like they're humiliation piss pigs. They like
They're
love
little piggies.
They're
love
addicted to
losing.
it.
Yeah, and so they can make as much money and have as safe a career and probably look better as the opposition party.
Yeah.
And what MSNBC and CNN learned is that like Trump gets people glued to the TV, and so they don't have to offer any solutions. They have to run scary shit on TV all the time, appear to be adversarial, even when like the systems that they are a part of are like how we got here. And so any sort of I don't know exactly what I'm saying, but I really just don't see any hope in the Democratic Party or big national like cable news centered corporate media is just not going to cover the issues that we care about anymore at all.
Yeah,
That's
well,
just-
I mean, like, it's just, I think, to kind of umbrella that, and I mean, I think it's from our lifetimes completely, and I think from kind of the Reagan administration onwards, I mean, I mean, like, this whole, like, you kind of had to think about from Reagan to our current president, you had George Bush, you had the Clinton years, and then we went back to kind of harboring from the Republican side some sort of callback to Reagan, like George Bush Sr. with, like George W. Bush, and then we kind of have just to kind of put perspective, like it's just like we had Obama, and then now we have Trump, and now we kind of want to harbor back to Obama era kind of politics with Biden. And it's just, I think, like, this whole era of just kind of TV presidents, specifically, kind of skews, you just have, like, a very skewed ideology of what kind of the role of the president is, because it's so, I think, kind of centered on kind of this specific type of media. Like, we went from kind of TV president to our Fox News president to Obama definitely being like an MSNBC president, and now we're back to Trump being kind of the Pentecostal, like, kind of Fox News kind of dude. Like, I mean, like, this is just such a specific era of presidency specifically. I mean, like, I suppose it kind of starts with John F. Kennedy, but like goes, so I think kind of we build into this kind of structure of the president fitting like a very specific social necessity or role, rather, influencer, which you could kind of say, outside of just kind of like his presidential like roles, like and I we're really aware of it with Trump. Bernie kind of was somebody that like broke the cycle. I don't know, like, how do you guys feel about, I don't know, like, just the
Yeah, I
positionality
mean,
of
now
that?
presidents are like social media influencers. I love that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's true though. I mean, like, how many people has Trump hired on from Fox News? You know what I mean? Like, it's like, well, we're seeing kind of the breakdown of, I think, kind of the media industry in a general sense in the last decade or so. But I mean, it affects our conversation around around politics so drastically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you
So-
can tell when someone's watching CNN.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love that way of looking at it, Mason, because like I worked at a newspaper in like 2013, 2014, 2015, and in those times Trump was still like widely seen, I think, among the like general population as a total joke and like a buffoon, but like he was getting a lot of coverage in media, and I was really frustrated by that because I was like working for this newspaper and I was a copy editor, so I was like picking the articles that were like coming in from the Associated Press wire for like the Nation and World page or whatever, and there would be so many articles about Trump just because he had name recognition and because he was like he was like telegenic, and like because he was on the fucking Apprentice or whatever, and like so he got so much unnecessary coverage in the beginning, and it really turned him from like an outsider candidate to like a viable candidate, which is so insanely frustrating to watch. And like I just tried in every way possible I could to not be like myself be personally part of that at all. Like I would never like place articles about him early on and stuff, but like I was seeing them all come up on the wire. Like it was like there was all this coverage about him like that should not have existed. I remember one time there was this occasion where Bernie had a rally like 2015 or something, or like some campaign event, and a whole bunch of people showed up, and Trump had one, and like hardly anybody showed up, but the Trump one got covered and the Bernie one didn't. And it was like so nuts. And I feel like Biden had that unfair advantage with the mainstream media this time too, because it was like he was like the vice president, so he had and he has this like really stupid, like boomer friendly charisma. I don't see it at all. I think he's a disgusting fucking creep, but like he has this like stupid smile that he's just like, and people are like, oh, that guy, like he seems to just like he knows what he's talking about. And it's like he has dementia, he doesn't know what he's talking about, like but
I think
I don't know, I just really connect with what you just said, like
no,
the whole
I
thing
think
about like photogenic, telegenic, or whatever presidents like winning over anything. It's fucking real and it sucks.
Because the conversation really started with Nixon and JFK, and you know, like when we're talking about like I think televised kind of presidential politics and stuff like that, I mean, like JFK won the election because he's hot, you know what I mean? People could sexualize fucking JFK like a motherfucker, and we still do.
True.
And
the first televised presidential debate, and Nixon fucking lost because he looked like a nervous wreck, and JFK was like just lounging and super calm.
Yeah.
And people liked him more.
So it begs the fucking question when we're talking about like the size, like, you know, when we're comparing dick sizes of like campaign rallies and things like that, it's just like Bernie, like what I was noticing from the Bernie coverage is, yes, he's like almost engulfed by people. When you look at like the New York rally, you just see he's just such a small person in this like huge pool of people that are supporting him. And Trump's obviously like inauguration and stuff like that. The numbers, he's always talking about the fucking numbers, but like he's really just been able to kind of it's the Trump, like his charisma almost overpowers the image itself, you know what I mean? So it becomes like this whole other different type of conversation of kind of the way that you negotiate image over kind of like tweet, image over conversation. It's understanding kind of our transition from television to social media, and understanding that a presence, I mean, how many people do you follow on Twitter like are embedded in your thought process, but you don't even have like an image of them, you know what I mean? You don't even know what they really look like. They're stuck behind their kind of Twitter avatar. It's but you're almost like we're all at this point kind of talking pieces for things that we've seen on the internet, you know? So I think Trump has found out this like really almost more subliminal way of using social media and his image in a way that is allowed to kind of push power in different ways that like the MSNBC kind of like industrial complex hasn't been able to catch up with. They're just able to be kind of like fucked, you know, pissed off, you know, talking heads almost.
Talking about like the whole like TV politics thing, I didn't know Chris Cuomo had a fucking podcast, because why would I? But I was talking to my dad today, and he brought up that Chris Cuomo like sort of just broke down on his podcast recently, like with his corona diagnosis or whatever, and just like started shitting on his CNN job. Like,
really?
Here, I pulled up like a few quotes from it that I could find.
Yes,
share, please. So
I made a statement today being like, I like my job.
No, yeah, because he probably almost lost it. So, apart from lamenting having to tolerate public, quote, assholes, Mr. Cuomo also poured scorn on his actual job as host of Cuomo Primetime. I'm basically perceived as successful in a system that I don't value. I'm seen as being good at being on TV and advocating for different positions, but I don't know if I value those things. Certainly not as much as I value being able to live my life on my own terms. His $1 million job, he said, requires, quote, trafficking in things that I think are ridiculous. He attacked both parties, saying that he's tired of the chore of talking to Democrats about things that I don't really believe they mean, and talking to Republicans about them parroting things they feel they have to say.
We should have him on this.
No, yeah, like he really just like, I don't know, I guess it was the stress of Corona, and then by just like seeing that like the media apparatus had like successfully destroyed.
I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I think he's a pawn of his brother. I saw him talk on Andrew Cuomo's daily thing, and they did like a mini sketch, you know, of like brothers teasing each other. I think he's just trying to capture our audience, like the ones who, you know, like why the New York Mag has a when did everyone become a socialist? Andrew Cuomo's like, how are we gonna get those kids?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, to psychoanalyze him, you know, it's just because everyone's treating his brother like he's the president now. He's like, they're all and so now he just feels like a little bitch, you know. People like he freaked out about being called Fredo and said it was like an ethnic slur, and so now that he's even more of a Fredo, I think he's probably just would rather be governor or people like, I don't know. He gets no respect, Mikey. I'm your younger brother. I watched Godfather recently.
Did you guys cover Cuomo's nipple ring on the last episode?
No, we didn't, but I've been thinking about it a lot.
I just want to know if that ground had been tread already.
Absolutely.
What's going on there, though?
New York City.
I wanted to speak to something that Mason said real quick, just before we get off those points, like how Mason was talking about like the transition from like TV to social media, where like Trump has really been good at transitioning from like TV to social media and still having the power there. I think that is another reason why Bernie was the only one who had the chance beating Trump from the Democrats, because he's the only one who has a grasp on social media. Biden really does not. Like Bernie had like our generation and like has a way to, I mean, obviously it's his policies, but just like he's speaking directly to us in a way that Biden is just not. Like Trump has a way of speaking direct. I think it's like speaking directly to people as opposed to like being in this like mediated state. I wonder if that almost has something to do with like why Chris Cuomo said what he said, like just being like, I don't feel like doing all this mediated bullshit anymore. Like I just want to like speak directly. I don't know. Also, as somebody who works in media, I relate to like a lot of what Chris Cuomo said. I'm just like, yep, didn't know I had anything in common with you, but I relate to your criticisms.
Isn't how Obama, like how he became so successful in his initial campaign was that he focused more on internet rather than like historically, you know, candidates mostly focused on TV, and then he focused most of his campaign on like internet campaign. And I think I remember reading something about how that's like how he was able to gain such a big voter base especially amongst like younger voters, is that he focused mostly on like the internet rather than traditional TV campaigning.
Yeah, and I think yes, because I feel like he understood the culture. He used the Obey dude to kind of, like streetwear kind of like politics to kind of like push his own thing, and he was definitely considered like the Facebook president. And I don't know if necessarily Bernie understood the avenues, but his base that was advocating for him, almost his street team, understood the avenues of social media that allowed him to kind of have like a stronger presence on Twitter, Instagram, kind of like these social spaces. It's interesting that, but with Bernie, I feel like it was way more grassroots. With Obama, I think he was able to kind of capture, I think, more of the emerging media class of around like the late 2000s that was able to kind of pull him into a growing, I think, kind of subsection of culture that was forming on the internet. And I mean, the two align a lot. I feel like they both kind of, historically, I think they kind of jump they coincide with each other very well, and it's interesting to see kind of the vice president of this, the first quote unquote social media president, Obama, not being able to kind of carry the torch of being able to kind of, I mean, with that being said, he couldn't do it. He's like fucking senile. Where Obama, I feel like, was at like, I mean, like, the reason why Biden was even chosen as a president was, or vice president rather, was, for, I think, kind of governmental pull from a specific class of people that couldn't, imagine a black president at the time. They needed to kind of have the security of having this, like, dumbass as kind of like a VP, to kind of speak for their behalf. You know what I mean?
I think almost maybe Biden was there to try to get Obamacare through or something, like, because that was going to be like the only way to get it to happen. Or
dude, Biden was there because white people were scared. That's the only reason Biden.
Fucking facts.
He was explicitly chosen to appeal to conservative white Democrats. Like, that's why he was chosen.
Literally, like, that's the only reason. Like, he is a fucking. I'm sorry, I'm kind of drunk and fucked up right now.
We all are, sis.
Bro, worthless, spineless, nothing. Like, he offers nothing, absolutely nothing, and that's why he was brought on. He's just a backdrop.
Someone brought up the lame ass Obey dude, and I remembered that I have a Shepard Fairey print that somebody gave me from 2018. It's gone downhill pretty fast. It's Boba Fett dressed as a cop.
Girl.
And his baton at the flower.
I need you to fucking quit it. I mean...
Some food for thought, guys.
Ah!
Are you guys looking at it? Can you see it?
I don't want to. That's the thing.
Is Shepard Fairey worse than Mr. Brainwash?
Wait, who's Mr. Brainwash?
Did you ever see the Banksy documentary?
Don't look it up.
Wait, is he the French guy?
He's that crazy French dude, Terry Guetta.
This kid, Tom Dana, that I used to smoke weed in his minivan at lunch breaks in high school. That's his uncle.
No,
and he, like,
Mr. Brainwash?
Mr. Brainwash. Yeah, I remember him like telling me about it.
I bet he's a cool uncle.
No, yeah, he sounded pretty tight.
Kind of fucked up.
Well, I guess, I mean, maybe to kind of transition to maybe like the last part of this, like, I mean, this whole, because I really want to talk about this whole culture of vote blue no matter who. Like, what, I guess, kind of, what does it mean for November for a crew of people that seem very adamant about not kind of catering to establishment politics? I think, like, what does that kind of like foresee for the Democratic Party? What does that mean as, I mean, like, even just kind of the definition of leftist, like, if we're not necessarily looking to kind of continue being a part of this, like, political party, what does that mean for that binary specifically?
What's the best way to destroy it?
Yeah, exactly.
What's the best way to destroy it?
Yeah.
And we're in destruction mode, I think, a little bit.
Can I say I'm very, very, very disappointed about Bernie endorsing Biden? Honestly, like, it really, I don't know if it's...
Warren didn't even endorse him yet.
Yeah, Warren didn't even endorse Biden.
Yeah,
I think that's the inflection point for me. Like, when I saw that yesterday, I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry I mourned this asshole. Like, there was really an opportunity of getting people, you know, radicalized.
Yeah.
And this is the moment.
I think that Sanders, similar to a lot of other people on the left, like further, when we're talking about people further left in the Democratic Party, I feel like voting has always really been seen as like a harm reduction tactic. At least that's how I personally view it. I've never really seen like electoral politics as like an avenue for radical change. Historically, I mean, when we see radical change happening within politics, it's always been through direct action. And if we are talking electoral politics, it's usually, like we've been saying earlier, like at the local level. So even for me, like when I was thinking about like, okay, like where did my own support of Sanders come from? Honestly, a lot of it really was like harm reduction mentality, because there were things that, you know, I thought that Sanders could have pushed further left on and didn't, but like I still would have voted for him because he's clearly like preferable. So I think for me, this just goes to show that like, yeah, like whenever we vote, it's going to be someone that like we're not very passionate about. I guess the question is like, if we are, if we're saying that, you know, electoral politics can't be the only avenue for political change, like what is that direct action going to look like? Because like, I mean, it takes me like, you know, 30 minutes to vote, so like I'm gonna, you know, that doesn't take that long. It's like, what else can we do? And I think especially with like the quarantine stuff going on and like everyone's social distancing and staying isolated, it's like I'm having a hard, because before when I think of direct action, I'm like, you literally just go out and directly enact change, like physically, like, you know. And now I'm like, what am I gonna do from like inside my house? Like it's just like,
yeah.
I think like protests. I think of like, I don't know, like even things like riots. But like, I don't. What am I gonna do from inside my room? It's just it's hard to think about. That's where I'm stuck.
The short answer of what they're doing in Chile, and well, it's in a way it's easier because our last democracy was written in 1980 by a bunch of Chicago boys and militaries, basically. So yeah, what people have been doing now is, I feel the social uprising that happened there, in a way, is more loyal to, is completely anti-systemic. It's really burning things down. It's very anti-cop. And yeah, I don't know. Those are just some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, like it's true though. I mean, it's just, but those are so anti kind of, even in just kind of like our like progressive leftist culture. Like it's just like I think like we're coming out of an era that I think Obama really and then I let me take a step back. I'm realizing, I think, in this election specifically, kind of the counterbalance of kind of Democrat, Republican, kind of like, they're both putting out fires in their own way. If it's like more kind of like global dominance in kind of military kind of rule, you kind of have a Republican president that can go out there and kind of push a certain type of authoritarian rule that, keeps us at like a dominant state of affairs. And when you have like an Obama, he's able to kind of sweep all of those kind of that decade-long kind of like era of, I suppose, kind of something that would see more kind of like fascist authoritarian under kind of like a wave of cultural kind of like it kind of like a cultural whitewash. So you're able to kind of see what as kind of like a powerhouse in kind of global politics is we're able to kind of push a very like racial, like multiracial, multi like gender, multi-sexual kind of preference kind of campaign to kind of push a certain type of all-encompassing, all-accepting type of culture that is kind of I mean, it's just, it's one leg walks, you need two legs to walk, you know what I mean? And I think it's difficult for us as people that have grown up in this culture to kind of reconcile our positionality as, I think, people that consider ourselves progressives in kind of like a more classic sense, as we're now kind of compartmentalizing that part of our lives. And I think it's like really interesting to kind of see, I suppose, like we grew up in, I mean, like in a personal kind of like point of view, my political, my political consciousness kind of came of rise during Black Lives Matter and at the tail end, I suppose, during the Me Too movement. And it's like it's such an interesting, and those are both kind of intersections of when politics and culture kind of intersect. I'm interested in kind of seeing how now that we have like a presidential candidate that doesn't kind of push a more kind of progressive image, which is kind of like the most forefront of kind of what we're important kind of, it's the most important thing. The image is everything, you know what I mean? With Obama being the first black president, we now are reverting back to this white dude, this old white dude that's a rapist. It's like seriously, it's a misstep in kind of the positionality of the Democratic Party and what they're supposed to be doing to maintain American imperialism. And then we also have to think about the fact that like now that this is such a clear I suppose fault of the party itself to kind of make sure that they're maintaining their financial interests more than kind of their cultural affluence rather amongst the people. What exactly do you what else do you do when you've been kind of fed this I suppose healthy diet of a different sector of American imperialism, but nevertheless still imperialism? I think a lot of us in this chat right now are kind of dealing with that sort of we feel betrayed because the candidate that we're supposed to be kind of aligning with, who isn't, I mean, Bernie Sanders, he's great. I would prefer somebody, you know, I think I'm a look conscious kind of voter, I guess, unfortunately, but that's how I was raised. It's just, I don't really have an end thought that I'm kind of leading towards, but it's just interesting to see kind of how, I don't know, since the 80s, what this position is. And I think you talking about kind of, you know, from a Chilean point of view, it makes much more sense about kind of our position as global imperialist assholes.
I mean, I just think that oh, sorry if my breaking. Like the components that led to this crisis are all about, you know, the U.S. maintaining its certain hegemony, you know. So
Yeah.
I feel I'm like, okay, so this is the moment and trick people into being conscious about those elements, you know, and how can you system that does not support you? Like I'm looking at the New York Times today, 3/4 of all the articles, the headlines are questions. Everyone's like now asking these questions that we should have been asking ourselves, I don't know, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
But
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I want to backtrack kind of a while ago to what Jack was talking about like what direct action can look like right now when we're all trapped in our houses. And I didn't really have like that much to build off of it with, but I think like it was heartening to see that like even during quarantine, like while everybody was dealing with like economic instability and like one of the larger things of like what's everybody going to do about rent. I saw a lot of people personally, like just on Instagram and Twitter and stuff, like reaching out and asking for advice on like, okay, how do I organize? Like, how do I rent strike? And like looking for online ways to do that, like ways to do that literally like where they're trapped, their own building. Like you can't leave the house and your problem is in the house. And people like learned to organize to the point that I think it recently came out that I need to find the article but it was something like 1/3 of Americans didn't pay rent between April 1st and 5th.
That's good.
Like
I think it was like 32%. Yeah, it was basically
like
a third.
A third of people just like whether they were organizing it or not refused to pay rent. And then on that, like the US using this current crisis, like and like where nobody knows what the fuck is going on, to like further its hegemony, like at the peak of like the COVID outbreak in Iran right now, Pompeo is now like ramping up, like calling the Iranian government like a regime, talking about how they're responsible for the outbreak.
Just like on a general note,
Our sanctions on Iran are affecting their ability to get like proper medical care.
Yeah.
Like any like supplies that hospitals need.
just like to kind of touch on like this year's election, I'm just tired of hearing the rhetoric of, oh, we just gotta stop Trump no matter what. Like even Bernie said it, like, which is why probably he backed Biden. But it's like, oh, that's the number one goal. That's the most important thing. And it's like, no, it's not. It's way bigger than just Trump. Like it's the whole system.
Yeah.
So I just think continuing this like this way of like this two-party system is like ensured to make sure it's either this bad white guy or this bad white guy, and it's like.
Well, also though, can I piggyback off of what I think
Yeah, go for it.
It's also kind of like, and I think about this all the time, and I think it's kind of like what also we've all kind of reached on is like the fact that we have all of these people in power who are so far removed from society on a personal level for themselves and then on a general level for everybody else. Like, how could they make any moves that would benefit a single person that they are in power for or to talk for? It's just kind of, I always really have a hard time with that because like it's almost radical, I think, to say that like senators and governors and representatives should have term limits. And I kind of feel like that might be the reality. Like they probably should, because they're probably at a certain point really not capable to make decisions, let alone write legislation or policy that could benefit any single person that they represent, because they're just like, you're past a certain point of familiarity or understanding in life. It's just like, what happens?
They literally only work until Thursday. It's like absolutely absurd, like the amount of money and power they have. Not to mention like all the back end deals they have. Like, I don't know if someone else wants to like.
Yeah. I don't know. Like what Val was talking about with like this idea of like the most important thing to stop Trump is like, it seemed like just like a really like an obsession with like returning to normal. Like I feel like a lot of people had just like in 2016 the New York Times election needle, it lied, it didn't work. The New York Times lied, they were wrong, and then reality just like fell apart for like millions of people.
Well,
and like ever since then it's just been like trying to get back to this idea of normal, when now we're in a position where it's like a return to normal isn't possible anymore because of like this corona shit.
Yes, and we're gonna talk about that more in depth in the next prompt after this thing. All right, thanks everybody. Oh my god. All right. back online. Hello, everybody. Hello. Okay, so I guess kind of the next thing that we were interested in talking about, unfortunately, I do have to, Malcolm ran into some technical issues and isn't able to perform tonight. If anybody here wants to perform before the third thing, there we go. I mean, go for it. Listen, the platform is open. So, with that being said, I think we'll just kind of hop right into our next prompt. I'm gonna write a couple of words that Mr. Kingsley Hopkins has said. My favorite dumb villain. We'll go in. I was texting Kingsley this week. Just to do this, I was texting. We text. We are friends. I love Kingsley. I was texting Kingsley this week on potential topics for this week, which is on another side note. Any of y'all can do that. Please, if there is something in your heart, please DM me, Mason_Wilson. I think everybody here has my number. If you don't, I will give it obviously. Yeah, anyway, now you can tell that I'm like kind of fucked up. I was texting Kingsley this week on potential topics for this week, and he hit me back with a really amazing prompt I want to present to y'all. Balancing between optimism and also trying to cope with a reality that things won't be normal again for a very long time, if ever. I feel like I've been trying to shift my optimism away from a life my optimism from a hope to return to normal towards imagining what things might look like and how to have a good life. Strange amorphous future. How to feel normal in a world that isn't anymore. I must become hyper normal. And this sort of ideology, this kind of Baudelaire kind of like hyper reality, this hyper normality is something that I've been hearing from a lot of people and is something that has been kind of oscillating in my head a lot as of recently. And I can't tell if it's from the way that I have just normalized a sort of hyper normality, and now with this downtime, I'm thinking of kind of the anxiety-inducing present that I presently live in. Regardless, bouncing off of this with the official first month of quarantine that we have all lived under at this point, where's everyone's head at? This is kind of a check-in. Hyper-normality is indeed the normal that we now live in, and I think we've lived in for a decade, whether we've kind of realized it or not. Really, I don't know if anybody has anything to kind of say about that, but I hope you do, because that's the next one.
Sorry, there was something that I wanted to say that was kind of like coming off the last conversation that we had and bringing it, like tying it in with this one.
Yeah.
I really feel like both the Bernie, like the situation with Bernie getting as far as he did and then getting so clearly taken down by this like coordinated assault by like establishment Democrats, and like his really, really normal positions being rejected as like too radical or whatever, combined with like the coronavirus crisis and like all these people getting laid off and people there not being any sort of safety net whatsoever in this country, and like Republicans being so opposed to giving us anything resembling kind of like basic care and rights and stuff. I feel like this situation is going to radicalize a lot of people. At least that's what I'm hoping. But I genuinely feel like it will happen, like, because we're just realizing how little taken care of we are. And there's actually going to be like a body count connected to that. Like, it's going to be unavoidable now, like how bad we have it compared to other nations where they have a sort of like ethos of taking care of their people. Like, there's literally going to be like numbers that correspond to like human lives that were lost because of this. And like, I'm just kind of feeling like there's going to be a lot of people realizing, I'm hoping anyway, like how much we need a giant societal change. But I just don't know what we're going to like do with all that energy when like there's also the like powers that be that are like doing the sort of like coronavirus capitalism thing where they're just taking advantage of like how things are to like push us basically further to the right. So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking.
Sorry, go
about. Yeah.
Your coronavirus capitalism thing, I came across like a Medium article that for the most part sucked.
Just to give people context really quickly, we're talking about Naomi Klein's ideology of disaster capitalism. There's a fucking quote.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I found this like Medium article today that it had like a lot of like capitalist and Americanist apologism in it, but it did have this like one really nice quote in it. Like the general like emotion of the piece was good, but this, I'm just going to read a quote because I think it's like really relevant talking about like hypernormalization or like normalizing this thing, and then also how like brands and capitalism try to do that. So here's the paragraph that the article is called "Prepare for the Ultimate Gaslighting." Pretty soon, as the country begins to figure out how we open back up and move forward, very powerful forces try to convince us all to get back to normal. Billions of dollars will be spent on advertising, messaging, and television and media content to make you feel comfortable. It will come in the traditional forms, a billboard here, 100 there, and in new media forms. The 2020-2021 generation of media to remind you that what you want again is normalcy. In truth, you want the feeling of normalcy, and we all want it. We all desperately want to feel good again, get back to the routines of life, to not lie in bed at night wondering how we're going to afford our rent and bills, not wake to an endless scroll of human tragedy on our phones, to have a cup of perfectly brewed coffee and the house for work. The need for comfort will be real, it will be strong, and every brand in America will come to your rescue, dear consumer, to help take away that darkness and get life back to the way it was before the crisis. I urge you to be well aware of what is coming.
I mean, I think that's like a great way of kind of, yeah, absolutely. I mean, like that the ideology of being gaslit right now is like so palpable in this environment. Maybe that's, I'm really interested in kind of people's personal kind of feelings towards kind of their like present kind of feelings towards just like the space that they live in. Maybe we can talk from more of like a personal point of view to kind of build on that idea.
As far as like, because my I feel like I'm like a few years older than a couple of you. Is everyone here like what, like 21, 20? I'm like 25. So like I have a job like in social work. Like, oh sorry, what's up?
I'm like 31.
Okay, bet. All right. No, because I have a job in like social work, like case working in North Jersey. So like I'm kind of seeing families get hit this hard. As far as like speak to the praxis of everything, I'm fortunate with like my job lines up with like helping people directly, not having to worry as like a vote is my only political movement or like statement, blah blah blah, all that stuff. But as far as speaking to like radicalization and like people shifting further left, I can't remember who specifically said that, but like I have older coworkers who are like 35, 40 from like Patterson, from like Newark, from like hard hit economic areas who were like obviously huge Obama heads and like saw that nothing really changed, and to give like any type of hope to anything, they're all completely on board with like Bernie, leftist politics, like socialism. They've all shifted to the left. I don't know if that really relates to anything, but just is sort of a beacon of hope of like people who aren't as politically engaged as say like us or like reading up on things are definitely, at least anecdotally, I can't say that word. But at least as far as like from what I witnessed from like a first-hand account, like people definitely are like further left-leaning than they were. That's all.
Speaking kind of personally, I feel like I'm definitely more like, obviously I know a lot of millennials and people our age are not good at like saving money, and they're bad, and you know they spend a lot. So I feel like after this I'm definitely like, I have this like paranoia of like losing money and not getting money, and it's making me, I feel like when things go back to normal that I'll be more like hyper aware of what I'm spending and what I'm buying. Yeah.
I think some like maybe filmic examples, just because I have I think about film a lot, is like a couple of movies that I've kind of aligned myself with like a hyper normality, and I think it kind of thinks this kind of conversation that we continue having about kind of constructing futures of like tangible futures. I've been thinking a lot about the films of like Greg Araki, and I've been thinking a lot about the presentation of kind of his characters, and they're so informed by media, and they're so kind of like I don't know if you've seen anything of his like Teenage Apocalypse like series, but that his most popular film is like Doom Generation. I would really suggest, he has some movies on YouTube that are pretty open, but he's a Gen Xer, and he has this like really interesting kind of point of view of these hyper like cultured kind of like 90210 teens drinking and fucking and just like constantly self-validating, and just trying to find things that'll just like get them off, and just like really just kind of like push them to kind of like the extreme points of like happiness. And that is really kind of drawn by his sensibility of being like a gay man in the 80s and 90s, and like understanding kind of pleasure and how that part of the culture industry is really pushed in America. But I think like if somebody hadn't seen his movies before, his characters are super hyper, they're super colorful, they're always wearing like sequins and just like crazy clothing and like just like super bright colors, and they're always doing drugs, and they're always drinking, and they're always having sex, and they're always just like super just like the pleasure is just always like such a prominent part of their lives. And I think for me personally, I think that's something that it's like an addiction that I think I've kind of realized as an American, that I really need to like I don't know, like kind of I suppose not absolve from my life completely. Like, I mean, I'm still looking, trying to fuck during COVID, you know what I mean? I'm still trying to find somebody to hook up with right now. But I mean, like, it's just like I think this it's like a detox almost, being in a space where I'm like constantly by myself, you know, and I'm like really trying to understand where personal happiness derives from. And I think a part of this idea of what Kingsley was talking about in regards to hyperreality was I didn't even realize how much of my sexuality, my presentation, what I was in pursuit of was so tied to pleasure. And I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something that like it's hard when I'm like forced to be absolved from, like, I was raised on Grindr hookups basically, so it's just like kind of weird to not have these like things to really kind of get off on. And that's like, it's such an American thing though. I don't know, we have such access to such pleasurable shit. I don't know, it's like so weird.
Go ahead.
Being in this situation is like reminds me of being like a teenager, like in early high school and stuff, and like not getting to like go out or do anything, and just like getting everything from like Tumblr and like media and all of that. It's like a really weird place to like return to and like kind of like access the same sorts of like skills or like coping mechanisms, I guess. That, I don't know. Yeah, it's just a weird, interesting place to be in.
This whole pandemic definitely has made me really hyper aware of like my dependency on like substances and like things to like make me happy and feel good, like you said, like hookup culture and stuff like that. Since we're like left with like, we're just like basically indoors all day, and like everyone's like, oh haha, let's just drink all day, like stuff like that. It's just like making me really hyper aware, like, oh, because I'm not in Brooklyn anymore. I'm back at home in Jersey, and it's like not having weed here. I'm just like going crazy, but then I'm like, maybe this is a good thing for me.
It's making me wonder, and this is gonna sound like a shallow question, but I mean it in like a deep way. Like honestly, like what the parties are gonna be like after coronavirus. Cause like I just wonder what like the collective response will be. Cause I feel like on one hand, we've all just like spent a lot of time, like we're so used to being overstimulated, and we've spent a lot of time kind of like dealing with that and like we're kind of figuring out how to amuse ourselves on our own again and stuff. So like I wonder if like there's this, I saw a tweet once that was like, it's going to be so cute, like everyone's going to be so socially weird after coronavirus, like in big party settings. But I can also see it happening that literally like because I also saw like someone tweeting like literally every party after coronavirus is going to be an orgy. Like not, we're just going to like skip the party part and it's just going to like it's just going to turn into an orgy immediately. So like I wonder what like when
My
people get in the
dream.
group settings, what like the group mind is gonna like say about like how, because we all have our own like individual thoughts on this, but like the logic of the group when like the groups can form again, I wonder what it will be. Like, do you guys have any thoughts on like what parties will be like after coronavirus? I kind of think that it'll be more toward like the orgy end of the spectrum, but I'm just curious like what you guys think.
I feel like we're going to create the second wave boomer generation. Like we're going to create the new boomers after this quarantine. And it's
Hope not.
I wonder what we'll call them.
Zoomers.
Oh my god, Zoomers.
Co-boomers.
I think people are going to be more present though. Like even in conversation, even with people you're like, oh, I don't really want to be talking to them. You're going to want to talk. You're not going to want to be on your phone. You know.
I mean,
just the human interaction will be. You'll feel more from it. Maybe, I don't know.
I think maybe in that realm is like I mean that I am a faggot. I think about AIDS quite a bit just because HIV is still so prevalent in the community, and I think like I mean it's interesting to kind of see that like this sort of social distancing and this sort of like really kind of just you're treading on water and communicating with your own community rather is like so prevalent in the way that gay men still talk about sex. And I think it's true, like I think we're now like in a point where like we can kind of talk about I mean like PrEP has really opened up the floodgates for a certain type of sexuality that hasn't been channeled by a certain community since the 70s, before the AIDS crisis and stuff like that. And I mean like I think for me personally, like when I think about like huge disease oriented things, like it's just like it's it'll definitely I think kind of change the behavior of I think more kind of for my straight counterparts, maybe kind of like an ease when it comes to accessing like a certain type of like sensuality or sexuality. But I also think it I don't know, I'm still in agreement that I think people have like this like innate drive to really connect, and I think about Greg Arecki a lot just because like I think his characters are so queer, whether or not they're on like a particular spectrum of more straight aligned, being more queer, like gay, you know, lesbian aligned. It's interesting to kind of I feel like people will be more queer. I don't know. I hope so. It'll be interesting.
I don't know where this lies, but I just can't wait to feel comfortable like touching people. And that could be like hedonistic. I just can't wait to like give a solid like hug to someone that I see on the street that I know, or like give them a like I feel like going into it I'm gonna like want to be like French and like kiss them on both cheeks just to like make up for it, you know. Like
I don't know. I feel like at least initially, people are going to be really conscientious of like touching surfaces at like in bars and stuff like that, and like silverware at restaurants, and you know, I hope. I don't know. I was never really a germophobic person at all. Like I was like I don't give a shit. But now I feel like people are like gonna have to give a shit, like not only for like not being gross or not getting sick, but like being safe for other people, you know, in a way. And I like who knows how long or like what the new social distancing norms are gonna be. I don't know. I tend to feel, I don't know, maybe, I mean, we're all horny, we're all gonna want to hook up immediately as soon as we can, but I don't know if that is gonna extend to like broader social gatherings, like just hanging out like in public. You know, I feel like people are gonna still try to keep more of a distance than before. I think that's okay.
The thing that's been on my mind a lot lately is like my mom, like every day, she's like, so you can start applying for jobs. Like, you should apply for jobs now. Like, think about your future. And I keep saying I have 2 jobs. I work at 2 bars. But I was talking to my one friend, Ellie, the other day, and she was just like, you don't, like, bars are not going to open up for a really long time. Like, social gatherings, clubs, bars, restaurants are going to be the last thing to open up, because once we can go back to, like, normalcy, it's going to be, like in increments. Like, all right, this place where only a few people are allowed to go, and that's going to open up first, and then we're going to see if the second wave comes in. It's going to be a really long time before nightlife comes back. So in my mind, I'm just like, one, what am I going to do for work? Because I feel like I'm going to be out of job for a really long time. And also I feel like our way of like gathering together socially is going to change so drastically, because we can't meet at these spots like spontaneously, like, hey, let's meet at this bar at 10 p.m. and grab a drink. Let's go to Carmelo's. Let's go here. Let's go there. Like, we can't do that. And who knows when we're going to be able to do that? Who knows when me and Mason are going to be able to work again? I have to start thinking about maybe I should apply for jobs right now. But even like, what would that even look like?
What are jobs
where you're working remotely?
Yeah, I feel like the ideal of like, I don't know, everyone's like dreaming of is like, oh, it's just gonna be like one day we're gonna wake up and be like, okay, it's over. Like, let's go do that. But like, it's not gonna be that way.
It's
this is gonna be the only quarantine we have. Like, we're gonna have one, and things are gonna go back to normal, and things are gonna open. But then, I feel like it's definitely gonna. In October, it's gonna happen again. We're gonna have another
second wave is for sure gonna come. Like, because this thing's not gonna disappear.
People are gonna wear masks and gloves like forever now. I don't know about masks every day, but I feel like those are definitely gonna be much more of like a cultural norm.
I think it'll some sort of go back when vaccine is made.
I have no idea. I hope so. But
That's a whole other discussion also. Like, is it gonna be public?
Yeah.
Fucking no. Like, fucking big pharma.
Yeah, $100 a fucking shot. Also, I've been thinking about like that whole like that idea of like incremental, like I guess like easing of social distancing rules and like mandates or whatever. And I was thinking about like how there's like this mortgage freeze right now where it's just like if you own a place, like you don't have to pay the bank, which was like what a lot of like the rent strike stuff was about. But like once the country like opens up for business again, like Trump is saying he wants to by like May 1st, which is fucking insane. Like what opening up looks like is like I guess like major and like truly essential parts, or like what are deemed essential parts of the economy opening back up. And I feel like at that point when that happens, these like freezes on mortgages and things like that are going to go out the window, even though it's not time to do that yet. And I'm like, I don't know, I've been like throwing myself into a spiral, just like worrying that like that's going to happen before anything's actually ready to open back up again. And like we're going to lose a lot of places that we love. Like places that like you did meet with friends, places that you could spontaneously go to are going to get lost because they're not necessarily like for the machine. The machine doesn't really need them to keep like just grinding us into dust. Which is like, so I realized that like I've just been like in my room just like getting myself sad, thinking that like my favorite places are going to disappear, like no fault of their own.
Well, I maybe want to kind of talk about kind of the evolution of like the physical space and kind of its ties to technology, because I mean we're in the start of a new decade, and I think it's way more of a kind of reevaluation of how these two, I mean, like when we think of the 2010s, we think of our phones and our tangible spaces being very I suppose different kind of spheres of our personality. So I mean we have our social media presence and we have our physical kind of embodiment. And I'm really interested in this pandemic specifically because I think it's really accelerating a certain part of our personalities and our certain selves, like a certain part of ourselves that yearns for human communication. And I think there's more kind of creative output in the way that we kind of present ourselves on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and I was gonna say MySpace. What the fuck was I gonna say that? But I think it's gonna be interesting. I think more than anything is how are these, and I think that goes back to this more umbrella conversation of hyperreal, is this integration of technology into our present tense kind of self, you know? It's more of this sort of like ability of these two types of selves to be in the same space. And you can look on YouTube and you can Google hyper reality and see kind of how our visual presence of things is going to shift. I think Google Glass, things like that. I think, we're going to have way more of a kind of embedded layer of this techno reality on our present tense, you know what I mean? And I mean that's future thinking, but I think it's the only thing keeping me sane right now is my access to technology. And I think that's like a huge conversation that is going to be shifting in years coming, because once we get out of this, we're going to be more comfortable, way more comfortable with this kind of technosphere that we live in. How does that get integrated into kind of the reality that we're missing right now? Yes.
When you were talking about like technology being like more and more part of like the physical world, I mean, there's like, I feel like simultaneously, like while people are trapped inside, they're like escaping their sort of physical world into the virtual more than we did before. And then simultaneously, like these, like I sent you like that article and we were talking about like the suggestions of like what that social distancing will look like in the future, and using like the Taiwan model of tracking people's phones everywhere they go. And when somebody is confirmed to have a COVID case, it back traces their path through the city and notifies everybody who crossed that path that they've potentially had contact, which is like, it does the reverse, where it's just like now technology that used to sort of like liberate you from your physical space is now dictating where you can move through that, like through your physical space. Where it's just like, all of a sudden, like on your fucking COVID map, a red line appears, and now you're just like, oh, I guess I can't take that fucking train now because somebody with COVID was confirmed to be on that subway. But no, yeah, I see like people in chat mentioned IMVU. I have not fucked around with IMVU. I know people are going to IMVU raves. Who's done that?
It's actually kind of fun. Or like Zoom raves, like Club Quarantine. Everyone's just like in their own element and in their own space, and you can like see the DJ performing live and stuff.
I just go for the outfits. I want to see what people are wearing.
Yeah.
So that's my main concern.
I miss the nightlife atmosphere. Like if something like IMVU, like you get to dress up And like, and also like with something like IMVU, like as opposed to just like a Zoom chat, like you're getting to actually be in a virtual space altogether that makes sense. Like it's not like I like called into a Zoom thing that was at Hollow like 2 weeks ago or something, and it was I was only there for like 5 minutes, but like it felt kind of depressing to like, and like I'm really glad they're doing it, so I'm not like trying to shade them or anything, but like just
I'm
my
interested though. It was the dick appointment party, right?
What?
It was the dick appointment party. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the dick appointment party.
So what didn't work? What was like
like my experience of it being there was just like it felt sad to me to see people DJing in an empty room and yelling at nothing to like turn up, and then just people like dancing in their own like bedrooms with like all their like clothes behind them like in their room. Like it kind of accentuated how alone everybody was. Like it made me feel more alone rather than less. With something like IMVU, like you're actually like the environment is there. It's about the environment. Like we were saying in the chat, like Lex was saying, and I would love to hear you talk more about this, like the idea of like a virtual reality headset where like we could all like, it could be like we were actually in a place like Bev's. Like something like that. Like I think it's like the vibe that we're missing. But seriously, like it's literally like the vibe of like a communal space. That's the thing that's being missed.
Or there's a little bit more curated version of that. I don't know, I'm thinking of the 24-hour party that Blue, you could curate who would appear in the main screen. Like it could be people dancing, whatever, but it went from DJ to person, and there was obviously like a line there who they were choosing to put on the spotlight.
I've been thinking that like in like sort of what I was talking to Mason about like trying to imagine what like a healthy social life would look like in like whatever new normal we end up in. Like I guess in sort of like the early days of like when social distancing starts to sort of like relax a little bit, I feel like it's just going to lead to like a lot more like one-on-one contact due to just like safety and also just feeling safer, not being in a large crowd, rather than like large gatherings of people to feel community. It's going to be like more on individuals to like really like reach out to each other and like make sure that you see the people that you need to see, because it's like if you're only seeing one person at a time, then it's like if someone gets sick, you can easily backtrace through your own community and try to keep people safe. But I don't know, just like I'm really struggling to like think of like when things will get back to a place where you're like meeting in large groups again.
Yeah, I mean that whole era of kind of like large, I mean like the Coachella era is over.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? Like it's like such a stark contrast to kind of what we're used to. Cause I mean like I grew up on Warped Tour. I grew up on like stadium raves and parties and concerts, and I mean like if that's like not something that's tangible until 2024 or 2025, you know what I mean? Like it's a whole era that it's a splinter in the way that we communicate. It's a splinter in the way that we kind of view the content that we create in these venues. Like there's musicians here that may not be performing for fucking audiences in the foreseeable future, for the rest of this fucking year, which is like such a heartbreaking thing for somebody like me that works in Beverly's, where we have DJs, or Hollow, where we have huge, big parties, So it's like, and I'm attracted to those spaces because of, a lot of y'all fucking came to Bev's every fucking Sunday, you know what I mean? And that was like a highlight of the reason why I fucking work there, you know what I mean? So it's just, it's hard to like think of, like, I don't know, like I realize people might be apprehensive, but I feel like people might, if the if the opposite of that is true, people are just going to run towards just human contact again. Will it be more earnest? Will it be more sexual? Will it be more just like innately just kind of, will people force that normality again? Or will that be the reason why there'll be a second kind of wave of this whole disease? You know, it's just such a weird thing. I might end this part of the conversation soon if anybody wants to kind of comment on this.
I don't know about sexual or like sensual, but it'll certainly be more intimate. Like I've been like maybe like every warm day that like as like warm days get more frequent, I just think about like when it'll be consistently warm enough that like I just want to have people over on my porch to have just like dinner from like socially safe distance. Where just like we can sit outside, you're not in my house, you're not near my roommates, and we can just like actually have like one-on-one, like face-to-face time in like a space that's like sort of our own. Like that's the thing that's been like keeping me going. It's just like a dinner with a person.
I think talking about what Leo put in the chat about this VR art gallery, I think that also is something that's going to drastically change is like the art scene and like art openings and stuff like that. I feel like probably won't be a thing anymore. Like my gallery was talking today, we were having a conference about when we reopen, we're probably not going to have like openings anymore until probably the end of the year. And we're only going to be like open by appointment only. And it's just like, that was such a huge like scene or something, you know, like a huge thing within the art community, at least in New York City, is like getting together and like, you know, so that'll be interesting.
Okay, well, I'm gonna cut to another fucking break. And we'll finish up with the last thing. I'm gonna put this out here. If anybody wants to perform, please, if you have something that is like just like fucking, you know, eating at you, just like you have the space, we have time right now. I'm gonna cut to break, but we'll come back to our last topic. Yeah.
don't know why, I don't know how. Thought I loved you, but I'm not sure now. Seen you look at strangers too many times. The love you want is a different kind. Remember when we felt the sun? A love like paradise, how hot it burned. Threats of distant thunder, the sky was red. And when you walked, you always turned every head. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. Thought that when we fought, I was to blame. Now I know you play a different game. I watched you dance with danger, still wanting more. Add another number to the score. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. When you look around, you wonder, do you play to win? Or are you just a bad loser? I don't know why, I don't know how. Thought I loved you, but I'm not sure now. I hear the thunder crashing, the sky is dark, and now a storm is breaking within my heart. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. All day, watch them all fall down. All day,
And it's
domino dancing. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. All day, watch them all fall down. All day, domino dancing. All day, watch them all.
We're back. Okay, guys, we're gonna finish up tonight. I'm sufficiently, personally, I'm drunk right now at this point, so, don't mind me. But, let's finish up this last prompt. With, okay, so I sent you guys some articles about kind of big tech is making a shit ton of money right now. And shout out to streaming on Twitch because Amazon owns it and AWS is mining a shit ton of content from our viewer pool right now. If you with big tech reporting huge gains in viewership, sales, and the use in the months since lockdown, our reliance on this industry is our lifeline to the rest of the world at this point. It wouldn't have happened. This would not happen without it, obviously. We mentioned last week how our personalities are shifting because of technologies, and we commented on kind of relationships with virtual chat rooms like IMVU, Habbo Hotel, what was the other one? MapleStory. Lauren talked about that. I just wanted to have everyone elaborate on that relationship and how has our relationship changed to tech since lockdown. Is it for better or for worse? Are we okay with becoming more reliant with these companies and technologies to maintain a certain level of normalcy? And the one thing that I didn't talk about, but I did link in an article, was a Zizek article called Monitor and Punishment, Yes Please, how we're kind of inadvertently kind of signing up for a surveillance capitalism that is kind of becoming all-encompassing. And I feel like, for me personally, we're inadvertently in this crisis signing up for a surveillance state. Yeah. I don't know. Does anybody have anything to...
I feel like it was like Rahm Emanuel, who like might have misquoted like Churchill, but like said this either during 9/11 or like the 2008 like recession, but like you never like people in power obviously is like the context of the quote, but it's like never let a crisis go to waste, or a good crisis rather go to waste.
Yeah, I guess we're like I've been thinking about this and I've just been feeling really lucky that like Facebook, Google, they just mine my data to like sell me stupid ads for things that I talk about and not like rat me out to the government. But I feel like once they take that step, it'll be pretty easy.
I mean, you think of like things like Blackwater. I mean, it's basically 20 years since the war in the Middle East, and there's like so many private equity firms and so many kind of technology companies that have kind of profiteered on the technology that we've used in the Middle East. Specifically to kind of they want to take this technology and implement it more into kind of the public, the general populace of kind of the American people. One of the people that I kind of commented on in my own Instagram story today was this dude, Dr. Ross McNutt, who owns a company called Persistent Surveillance System, LLC, out of the Midwest in Ohio. He's currently interested in using drones to surveil more than 90% of the population in Baltimore, which is a predominantly black space, and has a history of my middle part is like fucking crazy. Who has had a history of Baltimore, that is, of leftist revolution, and justifiably so. It's this sort of old historic kind of this is when I really put on my fucking tin hat right now, my tinfoil hat, because like it's just like I think like our old kind of history of reconciling kind of civil rights era kind of radicalism, our Huey Newtons, the people that we really look up to, at least hopefully, are kind of their struggle is catching up with our generation specifically, and I think it aligns really specifically in tech and the way that we unwittingly kind of choose, or unbeknownst to ourselves kind of allow for the Mark Zuckerbergs and Jeff Bezoses of the billionaire class to mine our identities for cultural power, and I think the natural the transgression or progression rather is just fucking just war tactics on our own people, especially when we're talking about just people being more radicalized, so that innately pushes a populace to be monitored more. What does that with that being said, like, we can talk about the more personal, I suppose, kind of choices that we're making during quarantine to maintain a certain type of semblance of normalcy. I use Zoom a lot to talk to my friends. I've been on Instagram more, talking to people I want to hook up with. What do you guys like? It's like it's a broad spectrum. I guess that's kind of all I'm trying to say. If anybody wants to,
I've definitely noticed like people like everyone is now, even people who like took a break from Instagram, they're back on live videos and stuff. Definitely, I feel like big companies are going to take it. They already are. Especially once. Especially once I feel like after whatever this election turnout is gonna be, like surveillance is gonna be on all of our asses, especially talking about riot revolutions and all of that shit. So
Drop that tinfoil hat on, fucking fight.
Yeah, next time we should come in with like
Down.
fake names.
yeah.
Yeah, I know. We are using our first and last name on this shit, bitches. So, like, we really need to come up with some aliases. I know, truly.
It's too late now.
I know.
I mean, like, you're talking about like that fucking creep in it was Baltimore or Detroit.
So the dude is from Ohio, but he's pushing this technology in Baltimore.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, I think Baltimore was one of like I've been reading a little bit about like by reading I mean very lightly skimming Google results about I think like there's a few news articles about this AI company called Clearview. Did you guys?
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah.
It was,
Clearview AI came out with this software that basically they bought or just data mined through public internet posts, just like everybody's face, and they created this AI system where you can just take a picture of somebody, and it will pull up everything that the internet has to offer. It'll just track their face and find it across the internet. And at present, more than 600 law enforcement agencies have bought this like license from them. So it's just like a cop dash cam can.
So we're keeping the masks on, even even after all this shit. We're keeping the masks on.
It is cool that masks are now social norms, but also I have not changed Instagram like tendencies in any way. I'm posting pictures of my face on Twitter. I don't care. It feels. I'm
That's the face of the mask.
I can't drink with this on though, so this might be an
Yeah.
issue.
I did see. I was walking to the grocery store and I saw a guy sitting in a chair just on the sidewalk with a mask on, like watching the news on his phone, and he just kept pulling the mask down to smoke his cigarette and then pulling it back, and just like blowing smoke through the mask.
I found this website the other day where you can just like randomly search screenshots from computers, like random computers. I don't know like how legit it is, but it's pretty crazy seeing like a lot of it was like video game screenshots, like Minecraft and shit. But like there's also like stuff where like people's like personal info, like credit card info and like emails and shit like that.
What website is this?
It's called
Also, how did you find it?
I found it on a TikTok video. Don't judge me.
Yeah. TikTok is another one of those things where I feel like I saw a bunch of posts being like, "Don't use TikTok; it's owned by China."
I recently saw that this week.
It's like it's pictures of your face. It's not like only China has it. You're giving pictures of your face to everybody. There's like this weird xenophobia thing popping out. I feel like I think David Hogg tweeted telling teens to stop using TikTok.
He did. He like doing some whole campaign thing on it too.
Yeah. So
David
so
Hogg.
what?
Don't do it, man. I was just like, David Hogg, no. No. Some crisis actor shit.
Well, I guess, I mean, like, maybe we can kind of frame this conversation rather than in kind of our personal relationship to how we've been using technology right now. Because I think it's like, it's an important conversation to have in the beginning part of this decade of how I think institutional power is going to kind of take place over these avenues of communication, because I don't think politics and culture and kind of people's personal, I suppose, representations of themselves are more aligned than in the internet. And it's, I think, a really important thing for us to really kind of understand the implications of growing up in this generation of people that I think has had like a pretty I mean, I've been on the internet since 5, basically. You know what I mean? So I mean, my whole adolescence into my adulthood has been traced by big companies, Facebook, MySpace, you know, Habbo Hotel, just like, you know what I mean? So it's just like our identities are tied to a brand identity. I mean, like, we could talk about this from like a influencer point of view and kind of how that has been embedded in people's personalities. I think it's like such a, it's, since it's in no point in my life have I realized how instrumental technology has influenced the way that I view myself or the way that I navigate than it has in this last month. You know what I mean? Like, it's like it's kind of like an unprecedented kind of reevaluation of, for me personally, how I fucking navigate as a fucking human, you know? It's weird. And I think it's like I don't know, like, do you guys feel like, I mean, if the internet, if we did not have technology tomorrow, or like the power went out from a natural disaster or something like that, like what would that change about you personally? You know what I mean? Like, how would that reevaluate you?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the boomers are kind of right about our generation's dependency on like social media for like dopamine bursts. And like, I've found myself using technology every day, constantly, for pleasure. And I think that what you were saying earlier about like really trying to figure out like what makes you happy when you realize so much is like, when there's so much already taken away, it's like, I feel like this is a good opportunity maybe to to see what pleasure technology really does bring to your life, because we're being oversaturated by it right now. Like, it's all we can do. And then at some point you're gonna just realize like, oh, I don't really like it that much. Like, where can I go elsewhere? Or, you know, something like that. Like, maybe that's a good place to bounce from.
I would love it. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Lex.
I would love it if technology just like shut down. I just feel like I've been on my phone, on my Switch, on my computer, watching TV at the same time every day. And it's super overwhelming, but I can't stop. And it's just, the more that I'm looking at my phone, just looking at different screens, I realize that I don't give a shit about anything that's going on. Yeah. But I just feel like I have to look, because I'm so used to, it's just like finger habit. I'm just so used to pressing these buttons and scrolling and looking that I have a hard time disengaging. But I don't care anymore. I want it to all go away.
Oh yeah, I definitely I agree that like with what Leo was saying about like, maybe the boomers were right that this is rotting my brain. I have brain worms at this point from shit. Like, and I think like I remember just like I was in like a restaurant and just like watching like a kid was like acting up and being a normal kid, and the parents just like put YouTube Kids in front of it on an iPad and just like hit play, and the kid immediately just like off. Like, the kid just turned off, and I was like, that's me. That's how I act. I'll be throwing an emotional really just like spinning out in my room, just thinking about shit, and then just, like, I'm gonna look at Twitter. I'm gonna look at Twitter, and I'm gonna calm down.
Fucking true. I think people rely too much about, like, in terms of social media, they rely too much on like validation from people, and like using this platform as to show like your worth and like your success. So I think that's
now, like, but it's like weird because like I definitely used to think that, and like that's not exactly healthy. But now we're in a position where it's just like it's almost like that's your only communication with the outside world. Of like that's your public forum now. Like people can't just like see you doing shit places. The only place that like you don't necessarily know will see you is when you're posting away.
I sometimes think about the internet as like a place, or like the culture of the internet as kind of like a place you can be, because I lived in like the Pine Barrens of New Jersey when I was like 22 and 23, but I really like felt like I like actually lived like on the internet, but in sort of like this like urban mindset. Like I like physically lived in like this rural area, but like I didn't feel connected to the culture of the area at all. I felt like I like was, because I was through like Twitter and Instagram part of more like an LA, New York, like art scene sort of thing before I lived in those places. And then when I moved to those places, like it allowed my transition to those places to be easier. And like that never would have existed without the internet. And now being back in like the Pine Barrens where I grew up again during this, like, and like that being my only access to that world again, like feels like strangely normal in some ways. I think because that world, like the internet world and those physical places are so connected now. Like everybody who like is making art in like a sort of relevant sort of way for our generations is putting their stuff online. And like, I don't know, it's interesting to think about, because I feel like this time has made me like realize how much those worlds are connected, the digital and the physical, like particularly when it comes to like cities and art and stuff and the internet. And it's also like made me appreciate not really the internet but the place, because I'm like, well, now I'm back to just the way things were before, like where I have access to all this culture and stuff still, but what I'm missing is like the actual people and places of the urban environment that I like live in now. Yeah.
I've been thinking about that and like the sort of like corporate monopolization of the internet as like, if like the internet is like a cultural space, it's like by 2020 it's like a mall food court in a way, which is like run by like these large corporations. And like before quarantine, when I was looking into what's the New York City community owned and operated internet?
I literally listened to a whole radio show about this one.
Yeah, NYC Mesh. I'd been like looking into NYC Mesh and about like, and how they basically like outside of the corporate monopolies were just like creating another internet almost, like just like becoming their own ISP, like through community action and just like going on rooftops and setting up fucking satellite dishes. And then that also like dovetailed with like an interest in like peer-to-peer kind of shit with like Scuttlebutt, which I was reading about, and Beaker, which is like Beaker is like a peer-to-peer operated browser, where it's just like when you're interacting with a website on Beaker, it's somebody's website. It's like you have to know like exactly where you're going, and it feels much more like a personal space. And then Scuttlebutt is sort of like it uses, everybody has to be on the same network for it to work. Like you can only talk to people on the same network as you, so it become like this like more localized sort of thing. And like that idea of just like, what if like internet stopped? What if the internet machine broke? Like, how would I reconnect with people in a situation like this? Like, I don't know how to set shit up like that. Like, I feel like back in like the olden times, everybody would like know how to dig a fucking well if the water ran out. And I feel like now it's like maybe we should know how to set up our own fucking internet if this like techno-authoritarian state is coming, which it sort of feels like it is with like these like sort of like predictions of like a Taiwan-style COVID map network approaching.
And it's interesting because, I mean, like, in our lifetime, I don't know necessarily if we're going to get kind of so kind of communist socialist kind of ideology of like a more centralized kind of the way that our government is implemented. It seems like when we talk about kind of like community organization and we talk about kind of like it's the business mindset. So I almost feel as though that like if we're gonna see any sort of kind of grassroots initiatives in regards to this sort of kind of I suppose in this like cyber sphere, I think it's gonna come from more kind of collective understandings of the necessity of having your own server space, not having things connected to fucking Amazon Web Service. If there is any sort of way that we can create a website that doesn't ping back to AWS, I would love to hear about it, because it like pisses me off so much that like it's the cookies and like the sort of thing, like just logging onto a website pings back to a sort of notification that allows Amazon to kind of understand more deeply how you as like a personal user utilize your like search, just using the internet. It's that sort of information is so integral to the way that you can maintain your autonomy as a person, and I don't think it's driven home enough, you know what I mean? Because it's so convenient, and that's like such an issue with kind of the way that we utilize these big kind of umbrella social media services. I mean, like technology. I to go back to the prompt, I think like it's just gonna be embedded in kind of this hyper real way within which we navigate our daily lives now, and we have, whether we've kind of been cognizant of it or not. I think it's I think on us, and in kind of more to the Bernie kind of conversation we were having, more community-led initiatives to make sure that people understand that we're a country obsessed with our kind of individual freedoms. I think it's like so important to kind of understand how we as like I suppose networks of people, or as community organizers or grassroots initiatives, whatever kind of language you want to use for that, need to kind of organize together to make sure that these systems, technologically speaking, maintain the sort of autonomy that we like to reach to the rest of the fucking globe. You know what I mean? Like and I think that comes from, I don't know, these avenues. It's weird. It's such a strange conversation to have with people. We feel completely independent or free in these spaces to talk. I feel weird even having conversations like this on Zoom that's connected to OBS, which is a freeware program that then gets signaled to Twitch, which is owned by Amazon. You know what I mean? So it's just like so like, where does my freedom lie in this? Like, it's like so weird to like, I guess I have a recorded copy of what we're talking about, but it's fucking strange,
There is no freedom on the internet.
There isn't. It's a farce.
There's
It's
no
true.
freedom on the internet. That's it.
I'm like almost positive that I used to get TSA pre-check when I flew, and then I started tweeting about communism, and I haven't gotten it since.
Yeah.
One tool that just one tool, because like we're talking about how like like our internet presence is becoming more and more it's becoming more and more apparent how like it's a part of our identities. So I think it's important to like discuss the tools with which you can use to like do as much as you can to protect your like your identity. Like one thing I wanted to just mention before we went forward is if everybody knew what a VPN is, which is a way to like kind of mask your internet presence, it like encrypts your IP address, stuff like that. Like businessmen, when they go into China, use it to protect themselves from being searched by Chinese internet providers and stuff like that. So I think, to be conscious of that. I think using a VPN, if we all started to do that, we might be a little bit slightly more protected, even though in reality, probably not.
My work makes us use it, and I never knew why. Thanks.
Yeah, it's to fight hackers.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I use a VPN, but then like at the exact same time, it's like every single website that I use is linked to my Gmail.
It kind of defeats the purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's just like I have this thing the only thing that it really does is just like protect me from getting copyright claimed by my fucking ISP when I torrent in like Uncut Gems.
Fair enough.
I don't know. Does anybody? We're getting at like the 2:30 mark, and that's kind of where I want to kind of cut this show. Does anybody have anybody else? Does anybody else have anything to say, kind of in regards to this stuff? Or
I have a last thing to say.
Yeah, go for it.
So the first is I'm thinking of like critical infrastructure, even like what you need for the internet. So I'm thinking there's this community in Red Hook that built a microgrid, an electric microgrid after the Sandy hurricane. I mean, they've been doing this for a long time, and it's been such a long process. And they have their own internet system because of that. So I'm trying to think in like hyper local solutions. Am I breaking? And then the other thing is a friend brought my attention to the fact that it's amazing how obedient we can be to such stringent, like such strict measures of not moving around and like not touching each other and all of that. He was telling me like, imagine if you ask people in the Amazon, you know, like, sorry guys, you can't leave your communities or whatever, your houses, and not touch each other. We're just so alienated that for us it's like, okay, yeah, we'll just comply and stay home. I don't know, that restriction on bodies and like us just being so obedient. Yeah, it's just an observation I've been thinking about.
Okay.
Noted.
Cool. Well, that's it then. Episode 2 of Private Program, everyone. Obedience is the word that we will fucking leave on because we are very obedient to this system. By episode 5, I hope I have black pilled you guys enough to start a revolt.
Yes, let's do it.
On that note, y'all, I love you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming back. We'll be back next Tuesday. Hopefully with a fucking musical guest and more fucking content from everybody here. Let's break it up and like bring some fun shit to this. This is some heavy shit. And we're running out of big concepts to kind of talk about. So,
come out every day now.
What's that?
Like big concept coming out every day now.
It's fucked. It's absolutely fucked.
There will be some new ones by next week.
Yeah.
5G.
New shit is happening.
Oh, we haven't even talked about 5G yet, which is like something we absolutely need to bring up
It's
next
fast,
week.
though.
Did you guys see this?
Alright. We can continue talking. I'm gonna cut everybody else because we're at the 3:30 mark. Peace, y'all. I'll take care. And